On Monday, we spoke about all the languages that I speak, and today we're going to be talking about my experiences as an international reader, but most importantly about your experiences as international readers. Hello lovely book dragons, and welcome back to another exciting language related video. If you missed somehow what I'm talking about, on Sunday I was on Abby's channel with Patrick, Andy, Alicia, Ola and Abby herself, and we talked about the languages that we speak, our experiences as international readers, the importance of education on all this. And if you missed it, it was a very good chat, so go on over to Abby's channel. I will leave it linked down below so you can go check out that video. I will also leave all of my other friends' channels linked up below so you can check them out. They're all wonderful people and you're missing out if you're not following them. On Monday on this channel, I made a video which I will leave linked up here in the cards about all the languages that I speak, why I speak them, how it was to learn them, and I sampled some of them for you. Yes, I did. It's always a bit uncomfortable to do that, but I did. And today I actually want to talk about my experiences as an international reader and your experiences as an international reader. I took to my Instagram, which is Petit Coin Lecture, which is a French name for little reading corner, and I asked you a few questions about being an international reader, and I will show your answers in this video. So first, let's talk about my experiences as an international reader. So as a kid, of course, I could only ever read translated works or originally written in French or German, which is basically what I did. I was reading mostly in French because it was the language I was most comfortable in. I was also reading in Portuguese, which my mother absolutely wanted me to know how to read and write Portuguese, which was a good call on her part. So I was reading in those languages and in German. But most of the stuff that I was reading, my favorite things that I was reading as a kid, were translated works. For example, the books that got me into reading, that made me a reader, that have been influential to all my life, are the famous five. But I didn't know them as the famous five. I knew them as Os Cinco because I was reading them in Portuguese. These are actually the books that got my mom into reading, and one day she bought them all for me in Portuguese because she wanted me to have the same experience she did. And so I was reading these, but of course I didn't know anything about translated works when I was a child. But yeah, I love these books, and these are fundamental to why I'm here. I was reading Pride and Prejudice as a kid, which I was reading in French, but it is not written in French. So I read a lot of translated works as a child or as a young teen. Everything I was reading was translated. Then when I started going to school and I started reading more German, I noticed, wow, this is quite difficult because German and French, very different. Latin language and then Germanic language over here, very different. And then when I added English to the mix, it was just a party. It was just a party of reading in different languages, and something that I've learned as an international reader. So if we go to translated works, which I actually have a question for this in the survey that I'm going to be mentioning in a little bit, and then we talked about this, if I'm not mistaken, on Abby's live show, is the fact that, do you actually read the author's words? Because a lot of people say, oh, I love this author's writing style, but they're reading a translation. So can you actually say that you're reading the author's words when you're reading a translation or not? We'll see what you said about this. I think that a translation doesn't differ that much, but they're not the same. So I don't know. I'm a little bit torn myself on this topic. As an international reader, something that I've learned is that you sometimes just have to accept the fact that if you're not reading in your native language and you're starting to read in a different language, is that you just have to get used to reading without understanding everything. When I started reading English, I had a choice to make. I was reading a book and I wasn't understanding words. So did I pick up a dictionary for every single word that I was reading, or would I just roll with the punches and say, bah, I'll get it from context clues? In the beginning, I was that person that was like, dictionary, writing down the definitions next to the word in the book. And then I realized this is gonna take me forever, and I just gotta learn to go with it and to see what I pick up just from the context. It's really funny because even one time when I was in high school, we were reading A Streetcar Named Desire, and in one of the scenes in the book, they are playing poker and they're talking about chips. And even my English teacher, okay, who went to school in the UK to learn English, to teach it to other kids, he made this mistake and he said, oh, yeah, so we see in this scene that they're playing poker and they're eating some chips. And then one of my classmates actually said, excuse me, I think they're talking about poker chips and not like chips that you eat, you know? Because, so that is something as an international reader, you sometimes don't pick up on words because you don't understand that there's either a subtext. You could not understand something like that. You could not understand double meanings. And for example, there are a lot of when when I went to university, one of my favorite teachers, he said, you love to read, have you read Terry Pratchett? And I was like, no, I haven't. And then watching Alan from Library of Alexandria talk about Terry Pratchett, I definitely want to read him now, but I know that I would not have understood any of that as a person who doesn't speak English. Like, even I think as an English speaker, as a child or as a younger reader, you wouldn't understand all the sub-context, let's say, but as an international reader, much less. So there's a lot of stuff that I just had to go with it and just learn the words. And a funny thing that I think is also very, when you read in a different language than your own, there are words that, for example, you've heard, and then you see them in writing and you're like, oh, that's how you spell that. Or on the contrary, there's words that you see written and you don't know how to pronounce them because you've never heard it out loud, or you have and you don't know how to connect the two. That's happened to me multiple times. There's like, I cannot think of the word now, but there's like a very specific word that I was like, how do you say this? And then one time someone said it and I was like, oh, that's a... Of course I could just Google it, you know, but I mean, if as a kid, if you don't have Google right on hand in the 90s or in the early 2000s, you didn't have that, and so you wouldn't know, and then you would have to ask or someone, and then you would have to ask, but whom were you asking? You weren't asking any natives either. So it was very interesting growing up, reading in multiple languages and seeing how fast I would read in certain languages. For example, French was my main language, so I was reading very fast in French, very slowly in German and in English, for example. Portuguese I was very good at because I was reading from as a child. Today I can read English really fast, but I notice when I read a French book, it takes me a longer time. And then, for example, French, so where I work, we translate some of our own publications from French into English, and the English ones are always shorter because you use a lot less words in English to say the same things in French. For example, I saw this commercial the other day on TV, and this is like, it relates, it relates to reading, but I saw this commercial on TV, and it was, they were trying to say in French said no one ever, okay? So they were like, I love rainy days, hashtag said no one ever. And when I first saw this, and it was personne ne l'a jamais dit, which means said no one ever, but it's not said no one ever. Like, you know, there's like the nuance in the words where it's like personne ne l'a jamais dit. I'm like, literally, if a 70-year-old grandma that lives in a lost village in France who doesn't speak English sees this commercial, she'd be like, what is this thing? Why are they saying that? No one says that. That's not a thing. But because they were trying to steal from English, it became a thing. Does that make sense? Another word, another example. The word download and upload, right? Downloading and uploading, they mean different things. You download something, okay, you know what I'm talking about. In French, the word is the exact same. It's télécharger for downloading and uploading. So when you're reading this and you say télécharger, what do you mean? Do you want me to download it or do you want me to upload the document? And the other day, I had to actually translate an IT thing. My IT department sent me a user guide that they had written, and they were like, okay, can you translate this? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then when I reached you upload this file in Excel, and then you download it as a something else file. And I was like, télécharger. So what the French people started doing was they started using download and upload, but they Frenchified it. So now to download or downloader and uploader, they are now words in French because the difference in the French language isn't strong enough to know what you mean, especially in an age of tech and IT where so many things like that data flow. We use data flow in French, but we say data flow. Of course we do, because the French accent is the best accent. So yeah, these are all the things that differ when you're reading in a different language, because if you were now to pick up a book in French and you see the word télécharger, you might now know this can mean download and upload, but if you don't know, you don't know. And then you have to use context clues to know what it means. So those are kind of like my raw experiences as like reading. But something else I wanted to talk about is, and this is very, very, very linked to where I live, of course. I live in Luxembourg, like I said in my other video. It's a very small country, 600,000 inhabitants, wedged in between France, Germany, Belgium. And we have one English bookstore in the whole country. Okay, so I buy all of my books from Amazon or Book Depository because there's one bookstore. It's a small bookstore. It's very, very small. Like my reading room here is probably the same size as that bookstore. So honestly, you don't have a lot of options here to read in English. You get a lot of like the classic literature, the classic English stuff you get, or you get the new hottest literary fiction things. Finding fantasy is very difficult. As a sci-fi fantasy reader, more like fantasy and a little bit of sci-fi reader, I have a hard time finding books when I go to the bookstore here. It's almost impossible because we just don't have it. There's no demand for it. People read in French, people read in German. You have tons of bookstores for German and French, but you don't have a lot of options in English. If you do, it's either the hottest, newest releases in certain genres. But yeah, like I wanted to read the Joe Abercrombie books, the First Law books, and I went to my English bookshop because I wanted to support them. And then I walked in and I was like, they don't have it. And she's like, oh, what are you looking for? I'm looking for backlisted fantasy titles like Joe Abercrombie. I was looking for the Great Coat. And she's like, oh, those things are too old. We don't carry them. We have Lord of the Rings because it's a staple. They have Dune because it's a staple. And this was the English bookshop, okay? So they have a lot of YA titles. They have a lot of the classic literature stuff, and then a few things here and there. But if you don't ask for it, then they don't come in, and then they cost a lot extra because they're importing them anyway. So that's very difficult. It's the access to books in English is very difficult here. It's very easy in other languages, but in English, not so much. The library is the same. I went to my library back before the pandemic, and in English, you can only find Jane Austen and all that stuff at the library. It's very, very difficult to have access to books. So when people say use your library more because you booktubers buy so much crap and so many books that you don't read, I'm like, I would love to use my library. I would love to, guys, but I can't. Like they don't have the things that interest me. And sometimes I ask them, so what if I ask you to get these books? Will you? And they're like, no, because we're not just getting a book for you. I'm like, you're right. You're right. That makes sense. But so it's not even like I have a choice. And then I just buy it myself. And which is why I have a lot of books on my shelves. So I've rambled a lot about my experiences. Let's see what your experiences are as international readers. I will answer some of these questions as I go along so that you get my answer and then see what you voted. Okay, the first question I asked was, how many languages do you read in? And the most popular answer was 2. So I'm not surprised that the most popular answer is 2 because most people speak either two languages. Like 3 was the next one, which I see, but then 4 or more than 4 was very, very rare, which I totally get, totally understand. But I got a lot of answers. I got a lot of answers on these, so I'm really happy about that. So most of you read in 2 languages. Like I said, I read mainly in English. I don't really go for translated works anymore. I have to sometimes. For example, The Shadow of the Wind was written in Spanish. My Spanish is no longer good enough to read in Spanish, so I'm reading a translated work. I'm reading it in English. So I tend to pick up the books in the language that I know, but I also read mainly in English, sometimes in French, very rarely in any other language, to be honest. If you speak or read the language, do you read in the original language the book was written in, or do you usually go for a translation? And the options were, I read in the language the author wrote in, I read an English translation for non-English books, I read a translation in my native language or other. And the most popular answer was, I read in the language the author wrote it in, which is, I was surprised. I thought that more people would maybe read in their native tongue, but so most people do go for the language that it was written in. I assume this is for English especially, because if you are French and you speak French and English, but the book was originally written in Russian, you probably wouldn't read it in Russian. So I assume that this is for English works. Then the next question was, if the book is written in English, do you read it in English or read in your native language? So a translation. And 83% said, I read in English. So that's cool. I do that as well. I read what's written in English, I read in English. I don't read translations for it. The next question was, when reading in another language, do you use a dictionary or not? So was it a dictionary or wing it? And most of you, 76% wing it. Same. I wing it. Which this is where Kindle is kind of handy dandy, because if you click on the word on Kindle, it gives you an explanation for it, so that's nice, but I also just wing it. What is your opinion on the following? When reading a translation, can you say that you like the author's writing style? And 60% said yes, and 40% said no. I knew this one was gonna be so close, because this is a question that I see everywhere. And then I actually asked, feel free to elaborate on the previous question. And so let's see what you guys said. So Kyle said, of course there are things that are lost in translation, but not enough to say that it invalidates the book completely, or to invalidate the translation. Then Lepaperpalace. Oh, this is one of my favorite French. I might do a international recommendations. Like Lepaperpalace, if you speak French, I love her. I love her. So I will link her down below. She says, it's feeling. I either go with translation or then I look into it. Jose, one of my best friends, said, depending on the quality of the translation, you can get an approximation of the style of the author. So he said, so for example, even if you don't read Russian, if you read a translation, you can get a feel for the style that it was written in. Isabel Simões said, as much as I can, I like to read in the language that it was written in, if it's Portuguese or English, because there's always a few details that get lost in translations, even if the translator is amazing. Monica said, you can feel the vibe of the author, but not really the writing style. Brigitte said, if it's a good translation, you don't lose the author's writing essence. One of my other favorite content creators, Kind of Insanity, she is a booktuber. She has the best style. She said, I think there's way too many differences between a translation and an original piece to be able to judge the writing style of an author based on a translation. So too many differences. And then Joana Soares said, it depends, of course, on the translation. In Portuguese, there's very good and very bad translations. So what I've been thinking is really, really interesting. The most answer that I got were from Portuguese people, and they say, oh, you get the vibe, maybe not the exact essence, but you get an essence of the vibe, but you don't get the exact writing style. So most Portuguese people were actually more on the, of course you can say that you like the writing style of the author because it's not that different, but the French people, and this is what's really interesting, the French people say too many differences, like it doesn't even compare. And this is something I may have to agree on. I haven't read enough translations into Portuguese, like English Portuguese translations, but I have read my fair share of French, English to French translations, and I do think that a lot gets lost. Because one thing, for example, in English you only have one way to say you, right? In French we have vous, which we use for, well, you have this in other languages too, but in French you have vous, which is the formal way of saying it, and you have tu when you are very comfortable with someone. In books or movies that are translated into French, when the characters meet, they say vous, but at some point they feel intimate enough to say tu, and there's no switch. And you know, and like maybe you don't feel that moment because you're like, why all of a sudden do you think now you're comfortable enough to say tu? This is a weird side tangent, but that was interesting to notice that the French people are saying that maybe you get too much gets lost in translation, and the Portuguese people think that maybe not, it's okay, not a lot gets lost. And so Kind of Insanity still added that, for example, all the translations of Sarah J. Maas and Robin Hobb, even though the translation is excellent, it's like nothing compared to the original writing style of how poetic Robin Hobb can be. And I tend to agree. I think that is my experience as an international reader. I think a lot gets lost in translation. I don't know enough about reading, for example, a translation into Spanish or into Portuguese. I don't know the translators, but into French, I feel like a lot does get lost. But I don't read enough of translations anyway to know. But I thought it was interesting to see what your guys' experiences were and what you guys think about reading in different languages. And so thank you so much for everyone who participated in this poll on Instagram. I often like to do this when I do topical videos to actually see what you guys think. So if you want to participate in my next poll, I will leave my Instagram down below. It's Petit Coin Lecture. So there you go, guys. Those are my experiences and your experiences as international readers. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about the translation question. Do you think that if you are reading a translated work that you can still say that you like the writing style of the author or not? Because this is very divisive. Like you saw, 60-40%. It's not like, it's not a clear-cut topic, and I would like to know your opinion. If you want to just comment something but don't want to comment on that, leave an open book emoji in the comments of this video so I know that you made it to the end of this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!